Hey guys, it's Shaylin. I'm here today with another writing video. So today I'm talking about something that I haven't really talked about in a while, and that's my writing degree. As everybody and their grandmother knows, I did my undergrad degree in writing. Recently I was planning on doing my MFA, but I decided to postpone it because many reasons. Mostly how much money it was going to cost. But I did get into an MFA. I've talked about my writing degree in past videos when I was coming out of it. I finished all my coursework in 2019, so it's been several years since I was out of that environment, so I haven't really talked about it. But now that I've been out of my writing degree for several years, I wanted to do a video where I just talked about some bad writing habits that I developed because of my writing degree that I had to unlearn once I was out of my writing degree. Just because I've now had several years to reflect on that experience, and ultimately my writing degree was a super positive experience. The last 2 years of my writing degree were the best years of my life. Just because that was a good experience for me doesn't mean it will be a good experience for someone else, but also vice versa. Everyone's experience is going to be different based on just a lot of factors, and I ultimately boil the fact that I had a good experience in my writing program down to the people that I was with. I was really fortunate to work with some really excellent, really experienced professors. Both of the fiction professors that I worked with, I was actually the last class before they retired. I boil it down to the fact that I just had an excellent cohort. My cohort was just so fantastic and talented and eager. I think that's just like my main disclaimer for any time I talk about writing degrees, just because I think it's a very nuanced topic, and it's not like I think the writing degree model is without flaw. Someone in a different writing program will have a completely different experience to me. I know people in my same writing program who were 1 year or 1 year below me and had a completely different experience. I'm not saying that the things that I'm about to talk about, the bad habits that I got, are inherent to studying writing and that everyone will walk away with these habits. They're just the bad habits that I took away, and that's one thing that I think writing programs don't really do a good enough job of preparing you for, is how do you keep up the writing habits that you developed in the program when you are set free. I'm not saying that these are things that were like consciously taught to me by my prof. There were probably people in my cohort that didn't get these kinds of bad habits, but they're things that I really needed to unlearn once I was no longer writing in an academic environment and just writing for myself. The first one is needing grades for validation. This is something that I think I relied on my entire life. Like, as a child, I always relied on grades for validation. All through high school, I put a lot of self-worth into my grades. So it's no surprise that once I got to university and now I was getting graded on the thing that I'm the most passionate about, which is my writing, that I would lean on that for a huge source of validation, because I had always relied on grades for validation. So it's not a surprise to me that this was a bad habit that I took on and like really internalized, because this is something that I had done my entire life. If I got a good grade on a story, to me, I was like, wow, I am a good writer. A grade could dramatically change how I felt about myself as a writer and also about the piece. If going into my degree, I didn't really feel confident to say that I was like a good writer. And to be fair, I wasn't really a good writer, but I just didn't really have much self-confidence. And it was getting good grades that kind of started to give me self-confidence in my writing for the first time. And so I think they became the foundation of what my confidence was coming from, right? I needed a steady stream of A's on my stories in order to feel like a good writer. You're gonna come to a point where you are no longer getting graded on your stories, and what do you do then? You have to find a way to feel validated and confident without that. And I think what I did was I turned that to like getting accepted by literary magazine. An acceptance became the equivalent of an A. With a good grade, you knew when the grade was coming. With an acceptance, you have no idea when you're gonna get your next acceptance from a literary magazine. It affected my confidence, and I felt aimless and like I wasn't progressing, right? In school, I could see my grades getting higher and higher with every story. And I was like, wow, I'm improving. I could actively see that I was improving, and that was super validating. Then I graduate, well, what's giving me validation now? Nothing. And so I felt pretty lost and aimless, and I had to really refocus and find a way to feel validated in my work just internally, rather than relying on external validation. Number 2 is similar in its needing outside approval to feel that a piece was done. This was my biggest problem coming out of my writing degree. I had zero sense for how to judge when a piece of writing was done, because in my mind, it was done when the professor said, this gets a 95%, you should start submitting that. With no grades, even still getting feedback from friends, they're not grading you. I didn't really know how to tell when my pieces were done. I used to take a really long time to submit my work. I got better at it, but in the first year or so after I graduated, I would sit on my stories for a month to over a year. I would write a story, maybe even get notes on it, maybe even start revising it, and not start submitting it for a year or so later, because it's I didn't know how to just say, yeah, this is done, because no one was telling me that it was done and ready to submit. I had no sense to judge that within myself. And that was something that I had to build up that ability on my own to tell when a piece was done, because I did not have the ability to tell when a piece was done because I was used to other people telling me when my work was done. And similar, number 3, not trusting my instincts without workshopping. I was blessed with really great workshops in university. Lots of people, I think, talk about really not liking their university writing workshops. One thing that I think has surprised me as I've gotten out of my degree and heard from just general people on Twitter or whatever, is seeing that it seems like the majority of people who go through writing programs don't enjoy their workshops in MFAs or undergrads. It seems like most people don't like their writing workshops. So I think maybe I was blessed with especially good workshops. Again, I had a really fantastic cohort because that was the only writing cohort I knew. I felt like most writing cohorts are probably like this, where everybody cares so much and really puts in a ton of effort and does really careful, sensitive readings. I was blessed with maybe an exceptionally good workshop, which I'm very thankful for now that I can see that that was maybe the exception to the rule and not the norm. But because I was blessed with really, really fantastic workshops, I think I didn't really develop great instincts for editing my piece on my own. I would write the piece and be like, well, I don't know what to do with this. Workshop, tell me what's wrong with it. And that's the thing, I could rely on my workshop to give me really good feedback. I don't think I really developed good instincts, and I think this is something I struggle with, have always struggled with, is struggling to trust my instincts with my writing. I always feel like if I write something, even if I feel great about it, other people have to tell me that it's good and that my instinct was right. I think I do find it very hard to trust my own instincts, and I think that I really relied on workshop feedback. Even if I had an instinctual feeling of what I needed to do with a piece, I couldn't trust it unless the workshop validated that sense. And if they contradicted it, then I would go with what they said, not my instincts. It was really hard for me, and something I'm still struggling with, to learn how to just trust my own instincts as a writer without having a workshop to tell me what to do with a piece. I don't think this necessarily came from writing school. I think I've just, in general, always struggled to trust my instincts on things. Being in that environment where I didn't really have to trust my instincts because there were just people telling me what I could do to fix the story. And then the last 2 have to do with editing. The first one was editing as a checklist rather than holistically. After a workshop, the way that I would edit is I would basically go through my workshop notes that I took during the workshop, then I would go through everyone's written feedback, and I would just make a list of every problem that people brought up. Every once in a while, someone would bring up a problem that I didn't agree with, but for the most part, I don't think I was very good at filtering which feedback I wanted to use and what I didn't. Again, because I didn't really trust my instincts. If someone brought up a problem, my instinct was that they were right, I was wrong. You can get great feedback in a workshop, but it's not like everything that everyone says is going to be right for your story. And I think what I used to do is I would just make a checklist of as many problems that I could realistically address as possible, and I would just try to hit all of them. And so I'd very much edit as a checklist by just trying to fix as many points brought up in the workshop as possible. I think naturally leads to some disjointed writing. The way to edit a piece with feedback is to take all that feedback and assess, okay, what am I trying to do with this piece holistically? Which feedback that was brought in addresses my holistic concerns for the piece? And how can I apply that feedback in a holistic way? Not as a point by point, because that just can lead to very disjointed writing. And I noticed the remnants of this because I was editing my short story collection, and a lot of the stories in my collection were workshopped in university, and some of the stories that were workshopped in university went on to be published. One of them was I Will Never Tell You This. That was a workshop story. As I was revising that story in November, there were multiple points that I got to in the draft that just felt really disjointed. And this was in a published story. And maybe a reader wouldn't feel this way because they don't know what my I was reading it from the perspective of what my intention as a writer was. And so sometimes a few sentences just jumped out to me as really jarring because they didn't fit what I knew to be true about the characters. And I had these few really jarring points, and I was like, this is not cohesive with what the story is saying. Oh wait, it's because I just added that line to address a concern one person brought up in a workshop. Because I felt like I had to hit as many points as possible, rather than editing it as a holistic work. I actually really admire the professors I had. I think were especially good because they were not really prescriptive. They didn't really tell us how we should write. Again, this was just like how I felt I had to edit, because I felt like, okay, people brought up these problems, they all must be right, I have to address as many as possible, and then the story will be better. And then the last one, which is really similar but built off that, is just editing way too drastically. I think almost all these points boil down to my general problem is that I've always found it hard to trust myself as a writer. Trust that like my work is good and have faith that my choices that I'm making are the right ones. Being in a writing program gave me a certain level of support that I didn't have to make those choices on my own. I think for me, as someone who's always struggled to like trust myself and my work, that environment gave me the ability to not have to trust myself. I could just like kind of trust fall and be like, the workshop will catch me, which is not really, you have to believe in what you're writing and your vision and have some faith and security in that, and I didn't really have those things. After workshops, I felt like I had to edit the piece very, very dramatically. I always felt like unless I could think of a dramatic way to change the story, I wasn't doing enough. Sometimes, and I didn't know this at the time, very big changes can be implemented with very small edits. But I used to feel like I had to completely overhaul my stories. I guess I thought that I had to do this like very impressive, drastic reframe in order to get a better grade on the revision. I didn't really understand or see that you can make huge changes to a story by tweaking a line here or there. But you can. I guess I felt like I had to do that in order to show that I'd like put in the effort. Those were 5 bad writing habits that I developed or were like exacerbated by being in writing school. Again, I don't have regrets about writing school. I think ultimately it did more good for me than it did bad. These were just things that as I've gotten out of writing school and have had several years now out of school to just work on my writing on my own time and just like think about how I write naturally and find my own sense of security in my work outside of grades and like academic framework, I can kind of look back and see the way my mindset has shifted when I'm kind of free from all that, you know? That's all for this video. I did a video a few years ago, like when I was more recently out of my writing school, on ways my writing has changed since I graduated. So I'll leave that as well since it might be kind of interesting for some people. So that's all for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in another one.